Welcome everyone from near and far, far and near. I'm Guru Fateh Singh, and we have Siri Mukta Singh and Dharma Singh. We have our faithful interpreter, Liftar Kaur. We're expecting Hari Jiwan Singh, and we're going to start with our mantra Adgure Name. Adgure Name, Gadgure Name, Satgure Name, Siri Gurudeve Name. Adgure Name, Gadgure Name, Satgure Name, Siri Gurudeve Name. Adgure Name, Gadgure Name, Satgure Name, Siri Gurudeve Name. So, if you speak Spanish, hopefully you can understand a little English, but if you need a translation, there's a bouton at the bottom, interpretation, there, press there, and you will get, you'll hear Liftar Kaur speak to you on Espanol.
Should we speak continuously, or should we stop every 10 seconds to allow her to just keep going?
She's pretty good. She's pretty good. So just be mindful.
Very good.
Don't go wild. Okay. So I'm going to read some. You guys are very concise in your introductions. You gave me the little bio here. Hari Jiwan goes on forever. I think he needs to write a book. But
Yeah, you can write books.
So I'll go alphabetically here. So Dharma Singh in the back with the orange turban. He's a Sikh and a Kundalini yoga teacher for 40 years under the direct tutelage of Yogi Bhajan. He's a SCRIAL, serial entrepreneur. That means he's done many things, one after another, a number of successful businesses. And since from 1992 through the Siri Singh Sab's passing in 2004, he was his driver and assistant. And he loves the storytelling style of teaching, which he observed from the master, and he observed the master in action. The master taught him through his activities, through his action in countless situations. So that's Dharma Singh. And Siri Mukta Singh, I met the Siri Singh Sab at winter solstice, 1974, and lived in many different ashrams before being with him in Los Angeles in 1980. Siri Mukta Singh progressed and moved to Espanola, New Mexico. When the Siri Singh Sab moved, they both moved, and he did security work and other jobs for him. And Siri Singh Sab called him his special assistant. And thereafter, he spent every day with him for 11 years. So, who would like to start and just tell a little bit of your story, how you got into this family?
I start. Go ahead.
Hi, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Greetings and blessings to everyone. I honor those who are practicing the path of the soldier saint. Okay, the path of Sikh Dharma and Kundalini Yoga. We started out in the 1960s with 20 million people who revolted against the establishment and wanted something new in their life, something that they could connect with their spirit. Out of that, only 1 million survived. And we're part of that 1 million people. And you people, I honor all of you. You're the progeny. You're the offspring of that consciousness. All of you. Okay, and you're like our offspring or our descendants, let's say. So I started back in 1974. I met Siri Singh Sab at winter solstice. I was a graduate student at University of Wisconsin at Madison. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was doing this, doing the other thing. I was a school teacher prior to that. And finally, I I just needed a break. I didn't want to be around New York where I grew up, around my parents at the time. So I went to school and was in graduate studies. And then I saw a sign up for Kundalini Yoga. I always had an interest in yoga. There was a man named Baba Ram Dass who wrote a famous book, Be Here Now. He recently died, and it sparked my interest. And then he spoke actually from midnight till 5 a.m. for a whole week on Indian philosophy, on the Bhagavad Gita, and just spirituality in general. I was fascinated with it. So I'm moving back and forth. That was prior to me moving to Wisconsin. That's kind of gave me a spark. So I started doing the yoga class, and people were very strange to me because they were all smiling all the time. I didn't understand that particularly. And they're very nice. I knew there was something there that I needed and wanted, and that my soul was longing for. So, be as it is, they invited me to winter solstice in 1974. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. They made it sound like it was a vacation with palm trees, and it was just going to be a beautiful thing. And I said, why not? I wasn't happy where I was living, particularly. I wasn't going home to New York at the time to see my parents. So I said, okay, I'll go. So that's when I did tantric yoga, met Siri Singh Saab. And at the end of that whole, the end of the solstice, he had people standing in line who could ask him questions. So, coming from an academic background, I had my list of questions ready to go. I had 10 questions for him. So I start reading the questions one by one. I get through about half of the first question. He says, come over here. What's this? I said, these are my questions, sir. So he takes the sheet and he rips it up. And he just goes like that with it. So I'm like a little, I didn't know what to expect. So he said, son, just move into an ashram and we'll go from there. And so I debated it. I went home. He fascinated me. I agreed with him. I didn't agree with him. I wasn't sure about him. But I knew there was something there that I needed that he had. So I wasn't happy with my roommates. And I said, okay, why don't I try ashram living? Let's give it an experiment, a little experiment. So I moved into the ashram. We had to get up for sadhana every day. Teacher, we had heads of ashrams at that time who control the energy. And he made everybody get up for sadhana. And 3 months later, he came to teach a tantric yoga course, and I think it was March. And I went through the tantric, and I was blissful. It was, wow, this is something special. Wow. And and then people started getting in line to give names. He was giving people names, and he was joking around, laughing. And this lady before me, he was joking with her. He gets to me. He starts screaming at me in front of 300-400 people. Mm-hmm. And I was not expecting that, it just penetrated right into my core being, let's say. I was shocked because he starts telling me I'm going to have a bad life. And he said, you only get one name every incarnation. Do you want this name? And I said, I couldn't speak. I was just kind of flipped out. I didn't know what to say, but I shook my head. Yes, that's all I could do. But I was flipping out, And this was really the first test, because he was testing me to see, where I was at. Could I go through this whole thing that was upcoming for the rest of my life? And I must have, I don't know if I passed the test or whatever, but I said, yes, I want the name. So I was freaked out, and Sat Simran, who was a person who was taking care of him at the time, I had spoken to her before. She was not the easiest person to get along with, but she seemed to like me. And I said, I have to speak to him. So I said, I have to. So she said, okay, come by this evening. So I'm sitting in front of him. I said, "You freaked me out, sir. What do you mean I'm going to have a bad life?" And this and that. He said, "Son, just calm down and move into the ashram and call me every month," he said. "And here's my private number." So that was the blessing that came out of that experience when he gave me my name. So I would move. So then we moved, the ashram collapsed, and I moved from ashram to ashram. I went to Miami, Florida, lived with 2 people, worked 7 days a week, probably 14 hours a day, didn't get paid a cent, but called him every month to check on my progress. He told me how to get through his staff and what to say so I could get to him, because it was hard to get through to him at that time. So he would give me advice, and I'll try to speed it up because I don't want to take up all the time. But let's see. So then I moved from ashram to ashram, and finally, 1980, I moved to Los Angeles. Okay, that's where he was. So in interim, I went to different ashrams and different experiences. He got me married. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. You know, it was a very intense experience. I'm not going to play around. When he got me married the first time, I was at a tantric yoga course, and he had said, "All single men and women stand up." And he started matching everybody up who stood
Is
up.
that the Washington course?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I don't want to get married. But he said, "Everybody under 30 who's single, get up, stand up." He started matching everybody up. My brother was with me at the time. He was freaking out. He didn't understand any of this. And I'm trying to sneak out of the place. I'm in the back, and I don't want to get married at that time. And I'm trying to leave the room subtly. And he looks at me in the back and says, "You, come up here." And he had this woman who was very popular, attractive, smart, more or less one of the heads of the community. I'm in my jeans. I had a turban on, just it didn't look like, I didn't look like much. He said, "Look into her eyes." I looked into her eyes. He said, "Good, I vouch for this. Get married." And everybody was questioning it. The head of the ashram went up to him and said, "Oh, there's another girl wants to marry him," which I didn't know about at the time. And he said, "Shut up. I vouch for this marriage." So a few months later, we get married. Anyway, I'm jumping back and forth. So back to when I moved to Los Angeles. So I'm with my wife. I met him at summer solstice, and he said, "What's your background?" I said, "I have a Jewish background." Well, no, first he said, "I'm going to put you in with Guru Singh at the brass bed factory, and you're going to polish the brass bed with pig fat. That's what they use." And I said, "Okay, whatever you say, sir, I'll do it." And then he says to me, "Well, what's your background?" And I say, "I have a Jewish background." He looks at me, looks at my wife, and says, "I'm just being blunt with you. I'm just telling you the truth." He says, "Fuck that." He says, "Go work with Hari Jiwan and Baba Singh at GRD," which is a selling enterprise. And I said, "Okay." And that started a long journey of working with them and being around him. He taught class twice a week, and he would be in communication. He almost saw me almost after every single class. He walked up to me, or I walked up to him, and he gave me energy. And I'm trying to figure out how to speed this up, but yeah. So he wanted to know how things evolved, and then he had me doing different things and calling on me over the years, but I was basically hooked into this whole thing.
Waheguru.
And I can say much more, but
Yeah, more.
You got to write a
Yeah.
book too.
I'll talk again a little later. Let me have other people talk. Okay, Dharma, doing it.
And your boss is showing up. Hari Jiwan Singh has turned up.
There's a lot, that's right, there's a lot more to talk about. Okay.
Okay. Welcome, Hari Jiwan Singh.
Hello, G. How are you?
Okay, oh, okay.
Excellent. Nice to see you. Wow, you got a nice backdrop. Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Very good. Well designed.
All right.
You're dressed to the nines.
Yeah. No, I just put a shirt on.
All right. So if anybody doesn't know Hari Jiwan Singh, I know he has regular email life with Yogi Bhajan, isn't it? What you call your
Yeah.
send out? It's beautiful. So if you don't know him, I've got a long Wikipedia article. I'm just going to read a little bit from it. But you were originally in St. Louis, another Jewish family, again, well-to-do family in real estate, and found your way to the city south. I'll leave you to tell the details of the story, but eventually you became the chief of protocol for Sikh Dharma, and I know you have some fun stories about that role. And Mukta Singh side. So, and well, fast forward, you're in Espanola. You've been in Espanola for many years with your wife from Toronto, and you have two lovely children.
You covered that.
So we'll come back. Dharma Singh, I think, is going to talk about his journey to the city Singh Sab to join our family, and then you can, in your own words, talk about how your journey began. Okay, how are you doing, Singh? Mukta Singh Sab? Yeah.
You want me or Dharma now?
He's first, and then you'll correct me, or you'll give a better intro as to how you got here, what brought you here. Okay.
You want me to talk
Dharma
about it
Singh
now?
first. Dharma Singh first.
Dharma. Okay.
You go first. Well, first I started with my mother and father in New York. I was born into one side of my family is one of the most wealthy families in the United States. So they were all educated, Harvard, Vassar. So it was pushed at me from day one. Intellectual, this, that, the other thing. And I liked studying, I liked books, but I liked sports a lot more. It was my yoga before yoga. And in high school and college, I played basketball more than I studied, let's say. And I just didn't want to grow up. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I realized I wasn't going to play professional basketball. And I kind of knew it all along, but whatever. So there's some lost years in there. And then some people in Cambridge told me about this yogi that did tantric yoga, did all of this stuff. And it was fascinating to me. But I said, not yet, not yet. I got to finish the life I'm living right now. And finally, I cut it. And I went to a class in Harvard Square. And I met Gurcharan Singh, Mukta Singh Sahib Gurcharan Singh. And we chanted Om Namo. And all of a sudden, I saw angels and gurus floating through the air. And you're home, you're free. I never had an experience like that in my life. I'm down to earth, don't see auras particularly. I'm sensitive to people and what they are thinking and this and that, but I'm gonna say I see auras. I saw all this stuff, but it was very peaceful. It was beautiful. And you're home, you're home, you're home. And boy, I needed a home. I was 27 years old. And from 18 to 27, all my friends were getting doctorates and becoming corporate presidents. And I was painting houses and having part-time jobs. So I started going to class every day. And whatever I do it all. And it was really working for me. I'd work all day. I'd be so tired, but after yoga class, I'd have energy again. I'd be up all night talking to the people and asking him all sorts of questions. And I saw these books by him up on the thing in the office where the yoga was taught. And I read them and I was like, wow, this is it. And it took me another year and a half to put a turban on because a couple of reasons. One was because I had a high school reunion coming up and I I could grow my hair, but I couldn't quite put the turban on. I waited till right after that. But I wanted to make sure I was going to do it. But I was sure already as soon as I started reading the books. And then they talked about white tantric yoga. And I went and I saw this man. I mean, I've seen basketball players, pro basketball players, 7 foot, Shaquille O'Neal, huge people. And this man's aura made them look like dwarfs. I was amazed. I mean, it's like floating on air. As a matter of fact, before I became a Sikh and did those yoga in Harvard Square, I saw 5 or 10 Sikhs walking around, and they looked to me like they were floating. Again, I had a vision. They were above the ground, floating with their bana on. And little did I know they made $5 a week. And this is stuff I started finding out. We make $5 a week. I said, how do you get clothes? Well, every 3 or 4 months, we get a bolt of cotton and our wives go down and cut some off and we make the clothes. I go, oh, and what else? And it was unbelievable. I mean, it was just like, we work till 1 in the morning and get up at 3:34 in the morning. And I was like, these people are incredible. I mean, just incredible. So I worked and I did Upsahai Hoa for a year. And all of a sudden I went from a worker to a businessman. I had a very successful business for 8 years. And then the ashram started falling apart. The leadership started falling apart. And he called me and he said, you're to be a billionaire, all this banana peels under me. He told me all these great things. And Kurban, another person there, and I started working on his businesses from a distance. And one day I wrote a letter to him saying, I'm dealing with your staff and they're pretty messed up, and ticked them off, ticked them down one by one, what they were. And I FedExed it to him. And the next day he flew to Europe and he stopped in New York, and I had driven down to New York, no sleep. My aura was wide open, and he walks off the plane and it's just, whoa, again, and there's 100 people there with flowers, and he walks right past them, right up to my face, this close. And I'm about 6'1". He's a little taller than me. And he starts going, you stuck your finger up the butt of every one of my staff. What's wrong with you? Just went off on me and grabbed me and took me to the side and yelled at me for an hour and a half. And my wife was sitting next to me, loving it. I mean, everything that was wrong with me, he ticked off. And she was like, yeah. And I'm just listening. I was like, oh my, what's going on here? I just came down to say hello, and I'm just getting bombarded. And went on for an hour and a half. And then the plane has to go. So they say, sir, the plane's got to go. And he goes, what? So I said, so, sir, I guess I'm pretty fucked up. What should I do? And he starts laughing. He goes, everything's all right, son. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you need to do. And I was like, it's just, and he just smashed me to smithereens. And I passed the test, and that I just said, okay, well, what's next, So I'll take it to there for now. That's how a snippet of how I got into Sikh Dharma.
Why
go on for months, but who couldn't?
Maybe you could write a book too.
Yeah, we should do this twice a month. Go ahead. Or Jiwan's got more stories than me.
God bless. Okay, Mukta Singh Sahib ji.
You want me to tell the story of how I got here?
Yeah.
Well, I was dating this girl, and she was, as I got older, she was younger, and I was right at that time when things were changing in the middle 1960s and to the late 1960s. And things that I didn't even know about, she was already doing, like eating right and thinking right and trying to clean herself up, et cetera, et cetera. One day, she told me that she found Jesus. I said, he's been here all along. You didn't, he wasn't lost. She said, no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is I've become a devotee. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit, how she could leave me for some guy who died 2,000 years ago. So I became an ISM major, and for the next 3 years, I studied everything: Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, every ism, Judaism, went back to that. Went to my rabbi's house every Friday night for Seder, went to temple, got myself renewed with Judaism, studied everything, Islam, you name it. Finally, one day, I came across a sign that said Kundalini Yoga being taught. I was in a health food store in St. Louis. And the only thing I'd read about Kundalini Yoga, I'd read a lot, that it was so powerful that along with drugs and fasting, were 3 things that should be avoided on a spiritual path. Well, rather than turn me off, that turned me on. So I decided to go to this class. And I went to this class. It was down around Washington University, where I had gone to law school. I was familiar with the area. It was kind of a rough area, but it was being gentrified. And there was an ashram there where 3 or 4 or 5 people lived. And they taught yoga classes downstairs in the living room every night. There was just 3 people in the class: me, some little guy, and some woman, and the teacher. And I started to do the class, and it was really tough exercise. Now, I was somewhat of an athlete. I could hold my own, and I'd always thought of yoga as kind of a passive type of an adventure. But this yoga that was being taught was very powerful and very aggressive and very difficult. I remember the one exercise, we did stretch pose with the breath of fire for 3 minutes. I thought, anybody that can do this, I don't. That the little guy next to me wasn't doing it, I thought it was impossible. That's what it was like for me. But I knew that you get back what you give to something, and this was so challenging for me, and I love challenges, always have. I love, very competitive. And that can be either good or bad, so I'm not judging it. And it depends on whether you compete with yourself or compete with others. And you can compete with others by competing with yourself, but that's a different stuff here. So I decided to go to class every day for 6 months because I wanted to see what was there. And I wanted to see if there was any experience. I was looking for this experience. I'd read about God and about who he was and about what the experience was. And I wanted to know if that was real, because if it was real and I wasn't doing it, I was missing out. And I didn't like to miss out much. So this class was so powerful, so difficult, that I decided to go every day for 6 months to see if there was an experience in it. I was waiting for like the Jews, the sky to open up and the storm to clouds to break, and there was Moses with his staff, with coming down and lightning bolting me with energy of God, and all of a sudden my universe was going to change, and this was spirituality. Well, it didn't happen like that. I went to class for 6 months, and there was no lightning bolt, and there was no fire. But what there was there's few ambers burning that made me feel different. And those ambers were so powerful that I wanted to feel the heat of those ambers more and more and more. And after 6 months, I continued to go to class. I also did get sadhana in my apartment by myself. And for another 3 years, 2 years, I was studying everything still, studying more Kundalini still, and practicing the yoga. And finally, I started to read. I thought, well, this guy, who is this guy they're talking about, this Yogi Bhajan that brought this there? So I started to read some of his writings. And that was a few months after I started taking the class. And boom, it was like, this is my guy. I mean, this guy is talking straight to me. He's not bullshitting me. He's not sugarcoating it. He's not telling me what I want to hear. He's not telling me what I don't want to hear. He's telling me straight. Little did I know that he was telling me the truth straight from the City Guru Granth Sahib, from the Guru. It didn't matter. I heard him say it, and it hit me hard. So I continued to do the yoga and my meditation and live where I did. And after about 2.5, 3 years of going through this process, I finally got to by the way, I'll tell you something interesting after this, but remind me that because it blends in with it, how I had the time. But after I'd been doing this 2.5 to 3 years and reading all this stuff, I finally got to the point where I'm sitting in my room, in my office, and
Oh, my goodness. I can't. I'm reading this. Some of it.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Perfect.
Is that
Sorry, go
better?
ahead.
Now, okay, so just put
Yeah.
yourself on mute when you're not talking. That helps.
Am I okay now?
Yes.
But I can't hear you.
Yeah, I know. You were perfect. Just they were talking over top. of
Okay,
you.
I see.
So we've
All
all
right.
got to do it ourselves. Okay,
All
guys?
right. So after about 2 or 3 years, I was sitting in my office, I believe it was, and I got to the point of saying to myself, these people are crazy, these hippies. I have nothing in identity with them. I'm not this. I'm like 10 years older than most of the people that at that time were in the organization. And I didn't have much of a relationship with who they were or what they were doing. But with the Siri Singh Sahib, Yogi Bhajan, it was intimate right away. And I finally got to the point of saying, if I don't do what he's saying full time, then I believe I'm going to live my life as a sham. And I'm not willing to do that. So I left my apartment with 3 swimming pools and an indoor and outdoor tennis court and this and that, and left my parents and my friends and freaked everybody out. What are you doing? This and that. And I finally got in my car and I drove to Solstice to participate in that Solstice experience in 1974, I think so, 73, something like that. And Medgar Charn went to his training in Pomona. That he and I didn't see eye to eye about a lot of things, and so I moved to LA into Gurdev Singh, who was a Frenchman who was the grantee at that time, nice man. Moved to Phoenix later on. Now I don't know where he is. And then I met the Siri Singh Sahib. Casually, I'd go to his classes. He'd say, "Son, I hear you're doing good this night." One day, about a few months after I'd moved to LA, I had confronted the ashram director's wife because she was leaving the garbage, not putting it in the thing at the right day, and it would sit there and the rats would come and there was ivy outside and they'd live in the rats and And so I said to her, you know, you have to make sure if that's your time to do that, you take it out because we don't want the rats coming in here. And with that, I walked back in my room. We were the only two people at the ashram at the time. And I had just finished work. I worked early, so I was getting undressed to get ready for work. Going to take a shower. And I guess she stewed. I guess she wasn't used to people confronting her. And I wasn't used to not confronting people. So all of a sudden, the door flies open and she's standing there, hands on hips, yelling at the top of her voice. And I'm standing there naked. Now, I'll tell you, it's very difficult to argue with a woman when you're standing there naked. If you ever want to get your, I'm just telling you, it is. And so I stood there trying to cover myself, and she did her thing, got through, slammed the door and left. And that was it. A few hours later, the evening comes and I get a call from, I think it was Satsimran. Howdy, Jiwan? Yes, G. The Siri Singh Saab wants to see you now. He's up at the estate. I said, oh, okay. I put the phone down and my heart started racing. I thought I was going to get defrocked and debunked and what do they call it? Excommunicated, whatever. So with trepidation in my heart, I walked up. It's just a half a block away to the estate where Gruki, she was one of the secretaries, answered the door and showed me back into the bedroom where he was lying on the bed watching one of those nature shows on public television. And he motioned for me to sit down. So I sat down on the floor next to him, next to the bed. And he continued watching the show, and I continued watching it with fear. And I remember Black Krishna brought in a plate of food, which she sat down in front of me, which was made by Guruki, and she always made good food. But I was so nervous, I swirled it around on my plate and tried to eat as much as I could and made it look like I did. Finally, the plate was done and the show was over. And he looks down at me and he says, "Isn't she fucking nuts?" I thought, here's a man who really understands the world and how that's working. He said, "Let's go to the movies, son." And I got up, he got up, we walked outside and someone had the car. We went to the movies and we just about went to a movie every day for 50 years thereafter. That's how I met him. How did I have the time to do all this? I was actually a working businessman. I put together low and moderate income housing to sell as tax shelters for doctors and lawyers and rich people so they could offset their income. And it worked because low and moderate income had decent housing and the developers got a tax break. And it was very highly specific because I knew I had worked for the government for a short time, so I knew how to, as a director of development and urban renewal in St. Louis, so I knew how to play the game and the numbers with the forms and presenting them to what was called FHA at the time. Now it's the Housing and Urban Development. It used to be called FHA. And so I knew how to put these forms together so that I could market them, and I did well doing that. 1972, I think, 73, I think it was. Without asking me, the Congress of the United States revised the tax law and cut me out of business. They just took that tax loophole right out of the, I mean, they didn't ask me.
They didn't even ask you.
And so I was out of work. And I, as Guru would have it, it was just at the time when I'm going through all of these changes. I'm going to yoga class, I'm studying all day long, it was perfect. And so I had the time, I had built up some income, so I had the wherewithal and I had the motivation. And that's how I found Yogi Bhajan.
Waheguru. Thank you. Did you say you had a little side story that was very entertaining?
Well, that was it when I when I got there because of the federal government. I'm here because of the federal government. Had they not cut out that program, I might still be doing tax shelters.
Waheguru. Waheguru. So that was the story you said you wanted us to remind you about. You go ahead.
That was it. Yeah, that was it.
Good. Good. Sri Mukta, should we go round table back to you? You want to talk about your relationship with the Siri Singh stuff, maybe after you became in his service?
Yeah. Well, he started out as my teacher, and he became, I guess, my surrogate father, you would say. I came from a fairly dysfunctional family. Father wasn't present in my life very much. Anyway, irrespective of that, he became my surrogate father. And over the years, he actually became my friend. So there were three things that actually occurred over the ensuing years. But beyond all that, the most important thing, he became, let's say, the altar to my own destiny. That's the way I want to put it. Okay. What did that mean? That I mean that I had the love for him. That I started out with that. But did I have the obedience to go through all the different tests? Could I do that? Did I have the endurance? And he used to refer to that as perpetual endurance. You need that on a spiritual path. That's one of the qualities that you need. So did I have the perpetual endurance? Did I have the discipline? Could I put this together? The love was already there. So and I knew that if I could be obedient to him, I didn't think of it this way, but let's just say I felt I would be in God's favor, let's put it that way. Although I didn't think of it in those terms at that time. So my whole job was to be obedient to him, whatever he put me through. And he put me through so many tests, from getting married the first time, getting married again. He put me through that. The first one I'm just being very personal, so I hope people understand. I'm not trying to hide anything. My first wife ran off with another woman, so that dissolved. He tried to save it. He had Jiwan go over there. He went anyway. It dissolved.
I like her. She's a good woman.
Yeah, she was a good woman, but she broke down.
Yeah.
And so the second one went crazy. He had me marry her. She had a little daughter I adopted, and she went crazy. I was living, she just went crazy. She threw the guru out the door, ripped it up, hated the Siri Singh stuff, so that ended. I guess I'll go through my marriages. I don't care. The third one, I knew her. I didn't want to have anything to do with her, but he told me to marry her. So am I going to be obedient? Or am I going to say, no, sir, no, I can't do this. I can't. I'm going to do whatever he says, whatever it takes. My will was enough that I thought I could get through everything. And that lasted 6 months. She had an affair with another man, and that ended the whole thing. And then I got married for a long time after that, and she fell apart too. But it took a long time. And she just didn't have the understanding. She was like, I don't mean to criticize her, but she's like a stone brain. Nothing penetrated her. And I had believe me, I had maybe more faults than all of them put together. I don't know, but I knew that I wanted to make things work. That I did have that desire. I don't believe in divorce, but it happened. So that's just one test. Then he put me through, he'd give me special assignments to do. And eventually, when I moved to Espanola, he put me on his security to keep me around, I think. So I did security. I was his personal security officer. So wherever he went, I followed in the car behind. I'd help him out of the car. He had trouble walking, and he had physical liabilities, disabilities. So I would help him walk from like his car to his class, help him get seated when he taught. And then he had me, I was responsible for getting food for everybody. So every day at 1 o'clock, I would bring over food. I'd go to this restaurant, I'd go to that restaurant, I'd try to figure out what people wanted. You had to deal with the staff. And that was a whole nother issue, dealing with the staff. You had to navigate that. It wasn't an easy thing. They were not, in my opinion, they were not accommodating women. There's a whole bunch of them, and they didn't like me and I didn't like them. The only thing that held the whole thing together was that I'm just trying to serve him. He was the only person that I cared about. However, I had to get through the maze of people that were trying to undermine me. I didn't give a shit. Okay. I just didn't care. I just wanted to serve him and whatever he wanted. That was my only test. So he would actually ask me to go get special food for him. They might freak out because he's on a special diet, but I didn't care. If he asked me, I'm going to do it. And so I was responsible for getting food for everybody every day. And oftentimes we go out to a restaurant, and then I didn't have to deal with that because everybody would order from the menu. So that was, and then I did security. So I did those two things with my job. So could I go, that's the underpinnings. Could I go through all the tests he's going to put me through? My love for him was always constant. That never changed. So as he became, like I said, the altar to my own destiny, I knew I had to go through everything. There was no alternative. There was no questioning him. And you be around him, you had to be flexible, non-judgmental, and you had to be able to go with the flow because the staff would throw roadblocks in your way, or well, he might do it too. He would test me all the time. One day, many years later, he said to me, "Oh, I heard you don't want to have to pay for all the food for everybody. You don't want to get the food anymore. And you don't want to serve me in that way anymore." Because the head person who was taking care of him, I think, planted that in his head. Somehow she just made up a story. So how am I going to respond to that? Am I going to get angry? I'm going to say, "What are you talking about? Oh, that's not true." I just smiled and I just put my arm up like that. I just went like that, like nonsense. And he totally dropped it. And that was the end of that. But I'm just telling you, every day, not every day, but a lot of days, he'd throw things at you that you had to deal with, whether they were external or something he came up with or whatever. So it was all, let's say, grist for the mill, as Baba Ramdas used to say. Anyway, so that was my journey. It was to listen to him. Sometimes I failed. I once in a while, it didn't happen often. I would question something. I used to not like the people he had in his businesses. I said, "How could you have these people around?" And he started screaming at me. I said, "They don't know what they're doing. The people are running his businesses." So we used to fight sometimes, once in a while, but I shut up for 3-4 years and brought it up again. Sometimes, it was a real relationship, we'd laugh together, we'd cry together, sometimes you'd be in the room and he'd be yelling at you, and he's talking through you to somebody else who's also in the room, but he couldn't confront them directly. So you had to bear the brunt of that. So he'd yell at you, and you had nothing to do with it, but he wanted somebody else to hear it. So you can't judge a master, at least for me. I would never judge. I would try to never judge him. And I don't know if we want to talk about it further on, because it's another one of the questions about these allegations. So I can save that or talk about it now, whichever.
Let's save that for good. Let's save that for good.
And so what else do I want to say? All right, I guess that's it. And it's just when you're in the king's court, there's a lot of people trying to undermine you and get power and influence. And my whole focus was on him. What did he want? And sometimes you had to intuit what he wanted.
It was a real.
Sometimes I would just get up. He'd be upset about something. He'd get upset about a lot of things. I'd start massaging his feet. I had that relationship with him, and he allowed me to do that. So it was an ever-changing landscape of being flexible, conscious. When you walked in the room, you could feel the prana of the energy changing. That's how powerful his presence was. So I love that. That was my life. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
He was a real musketeer. He was all for the citizens. He'd live and die for him. Okay. What was this part of it? It was what was the...
Tell about your life with the City Sing Song.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, one interesting thing with my life with the series, since I was when I got my name, and it was up in Toronto. I don't know if you're in Toronto or you're in Toronto, right? So I waited 4 months. I got to every tantric for 3 years. I flew all around the country doing the tantrics, trying to make up. I thought I'd lost 10 years of time because I got it in 1980. And finally, again, I didn't sleep, but it allowed me to go up to him and get in the line and ask for my name. And I had a shmata on that was sticking straight up. I was disheveled, but I didn't know because I was so tired. And just to give an example of how he was. So I went up to him and I said, I want a name. And he shakes his head. And that shaking of head felt like millions of lifetimes I'd blown it. And I was no good. I had all these chances in my life. My family gave me every chance. Everything was set up for me, and I just screwed it up. But here I am. So he says, well, what did he say? He said, he gave me the name Dharma Singh. He did the numbers, and he said, you have till you're 33 to get your divinity. Otherwise, forget it. And that forget it was as loud as the universe's resound. And yet it was like him turning a stereo up from 1 to 10 to 1/2. He had 9.5 more to go. And I was shattered.
How old were you?
I was 28. Okay. And I had that 10-year gap where I just floated around after playing sports and, not getting any degree, not doing anything. And finally I was getting direction, but it wasn't my parents' type of direction, but I was pretty comfortable with it. But it's another step. But I go up to the guy that's running it and I'm said, and he says, get your divinity by the time you're 33, otherwise forget it. And I can't tell you, I felt my aura go to 0. And again, I read all this stuff and I heard about auras getting shattered. And he shattered. There was no protection. I was nude. I was naked. I was exposed. He just shattered me in 1 second. And I looked at him and I didn't say, what do I got to do this time? I just looked at him and all of a sudden in my mind, I go, screw it. I'm going to do it. I could do it or not do it. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do my best. And if I don't, I don't. All of a sudden, my aura goes to 9 feet. And again, I've never seen this before and never again. Yellow, golden, 9-foot aura, like he talked about, I'd read about. And gurus and holy books floating through the thing, and peace and everything. And 5 seconds, I blink my eyes and I look at him. I'm like, and he winks his eye at me and he goes, next. That was 30 seconds of his time. He started and he finished. And he had a line of people, in addition to everything he did for everybody in Toronto and everywhere in the world. In 30 seconds, he took me from showing me how easy I could be totaled to what it was that I wanted. And boy, I wanted door number 2. So actually, I'm going to go into that. So talking about responsibility here and that kind of stuff. So I moved here in 1990 and he wanted me to do this big business with these 5 big business people. We weren't big business people, we had big egos, but we thought we were big business people. And all of us were free falling all at once. We were all going bankrupt. But we argued amongst ourselves instead of doing business. So I got pissed off and I said, this isn't business to him. This is bullshit. And, but he had to back the people that he was backing, Prem and Karimjit. And I was the odd person out, but I wasn't helping either. And I won't tell the story about it on the lawn. But let's say a year later, I had to quit. And I told him, I can't do this anymore. I've spent $250,000 trying to build this business for you. And I'm out of money. I got to get a real job. And that hurt me so bad. I said, I got to get a real job. I was telling him. It's the worst I ever talked to him. And he calls Daya up and he says, a call security, Daya, because you have anything from the call security. And I was like, ugh. But that didn't pan out, luckily. So a year and a half later, I started working with Siri Mukta. I went bankrupt. I had a new baby. All the money I had saved from my real good business, but I lost a lot of money and I spent it on that business. And I said, instead of saying what's wrong with him, I said, what's wrong with me? Why did this happen? Why did I fail when I moved out here? And I meditated and I went to sadhana every day. I took my daughter every day. And finally, one day I had an epiphany. I didn't take charge. I picked at these people instead of doing what I needed to do to lead. And it didn't solve everything, but I finally got the answer. I got to take responsibility of my life. I got to take charge. I stop picking at, my father outside of me or whatever. And immediately, this is 1992 and a half, early 93. I go over to the ranch and he had been shunning me for that year and a half, just looking at me and shaking his head like he did when I got my name. And there were 7 drivers of him, 1 person every day in the ashram. And he said, drive me. So I had a Lincoln Continental at the time, and I pick him up. The first time I picked him up, I inhaled real well, but I couldn't exhale. I was that nervous. I was just, what am I doing? Why me? And being the athlete I am, I said, why not me? I said, I looked around and I said, okay, he picked me. That's good enough for me. I have no idea how I got here, but here we go out the driveway. And I got past the rhinoceros successfully. I drove out, trying to stay in the right lane. We went into Santa Fe. And that was the beginning of, there was another driver and I drove 4 days a week and he drove 3 for the next 4 months. And then he said, that driver out, Dharma drives me every day for the rest of my life. So that's what happened to me. And I got went from, he said, Dharma used to pee in his pants when he saw me. And now he's totally comfortable with me. And I was comfortable, total respect for him. but we sat in the car and went everywhere, and we sat in the house all the time. Oh no, the first year I didn't get in. He had me sit out by the washer and dryer for a year. I listened to that washer and dryer, boom, 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 and I saw these people go in and sit with them, and I was like, and so and they finally invited me in after a year, and then I was in from that on. And my marriage wasn't very good, so Siri, Mukta, Hari, Jiwan, and I was to report to lunch at 1 o'clock every day, and we could stay as long as we wanted. But I didn't have a great marriage, so I stayed all night till like 3 in the morning because I couldn't believe he wanted me around, and I just wanted to watch how he did things and everything. So I saw a lot, and it's because I wanted to. I wanted to soak it up. It's just how my life went, and. Well, we went around the world. We sat around, as much more sitting around and watching TV and watching him have appointments. All of us did intimate appointments, with dignitaries. We met the biggest people in the world. We met the biggest yogis and swamis in the world. We stayed in luxury 5-star places, and we stayed in hovels. It was. It was just beautiful. I don't know. We served him all the time, whatever he needed. We were Musketeers. I was gonna, I would have jumped in front of anybody for him, and but it didn't go that way. He knew how to navigate and do his job and drop the teachings, and that was my job, was to get him to class. Really, the rest was just beautiful. Was being with him and getting to watch him do stuff for some reason. Hopefully, I can share that with people over time. So that's story number 2.
Yeah, here in Toronto, I never had the privilege of actually sitting with him when he did the counseling. We had the head of the ashram, and he was privileged to be there for that. And he absorbed all that, and then he freaked out. So we lost that here in Toronto. But
yeah, he did stop coming to the East Coast.
Organize your memories and anonymize them so nobody is exposed. You don't want to say, well, he said this with Clinton and he said this with so and so and blah. But you can anonymize it. So his technique, his technology, his methodology, example.
That's what I agree. That's very good. That's what I will do. I can protect the innocent. A male can become a female who lived in Europe, not America. I'm not that smart, but I'm smart enough to, I think, do that's why he had me around him, I hope. And
you tend to procrastinate?
He was my friend. He was a teacher's my friend, but in the end, he wasn't. Everything he did was for me. When I look back, he was totally personable with me, totally personable all the time, but it was always for my upliftment in the end, not just for his aggrandizement. If it was, that was fine too. Maybe it was sometimes, but as far as I could tell, it was all I was serving him. It was beautiful.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a tendency to procrastinate?
Tendency to procrastinate, yeah. Sometimes I go all out and never stop, and sometimes I procrastinate.
Well, let me ask you, we put you on the spot. When
are you going to every day now, so I don't.
When are you going to start this project? When?
Soon. Keep kicking my ass. I give you permission. I'm doing sadhana every day, so I'm getting myself
Can
ready.
you report back in a month?
I've had health. Listen, seriously, I've had health problems for 7 years, and I can't walk a mile right now. But I'm okay, and I'm doing sadhana every day, and everything's getting better. And I will get it done. I appreciate it.
Can you report back in a month? Send me an email.
Yeah.
Let me know how it's going.
Will do.
Great, thank you.
I'll put Siri Mukta in the chair.
Okay, Jiwan, I think it's your turn.
What am I speaking on?
You've got so many stories about your relationship. Just give us 1/10.
Let me give you a couple of stories that may tell you of who he was. 1991, I went with them to the Parliament of World Religions meeting, biannual, I don't know when it was. It was in Chicago at the Palmer House downtown. And representatives from all different religions come, and there's meetings, they discuss things, there's speeches they give. It's kind of disappointing, but it's necessary. This is what you do. And it's difficult to get to be a representative. And he had a problem because in Neighborsville, there's a lot of Indian Sikhs. Neighborsville is a suburb of Chicago, and they had a relationship with the man in Chicago who was running this along with some other people there. So it took some strings and some time, but finally we got to go and they got to go, and so we went as both representing Sikh Dharma, but also we represented Kundalini Yoga, so we got a pass. So we went there, and I would hang out down in the lobby, talk to people, see who came in, see who left, see who was there, this and that. And occasionally some of these Indian Sikhs would come by. And the reason isn't important why they would do it, insecurity of some sort, but they would like to try to put we Americans down as white Sikhs and not knowing, really not born into Sikhism. So how could we really know Sikhism? Fact is that no Sikh was born into it, but that's a different story. And so a few times I had run into a few of them who had come up to me and knew my title. I'm Chief of Protocol and also Counsel General of Sikh Dharma. And so as Custodian General, that carries with it a title and a prestige that they wanted to tear down. Understandable. I'm not criticizing them for it. I'm just telling the story so that you'll get his input. And a couple of them would come over to me at a time and they start to say things in Punjabi, which required me understanding Punjabi or understanding the frame of reference or understanding the Guru in a certain way or understanding actually Gurumukhi. And so I would just kind of listen to them and then I wouldn't say anything and they'd walk away smirking and shaking their head like, yeah, you're another dummy. And it was true. At that time, I was not as well educated as these people are about Sikh Dharma. I probably still am not, but that's not relevant. So I went up to Sri Singh Sahib. I said, sir, what do I do when these guys come over and start doing their number? He said, oh, son, just do this. Look at them and say, gee, you're so much smarter and more educated and well understood than I am. All I do is chant Waheguru, and that'll shut them up. And guess what? It shut them up big time. So, you know, he understood the essence of what it took to do things. I'll give you another story. He represented himself as a king, as a king of Sikh Dharma, as a man who represented his guru in that royal fashion. Beautiful concept. In order to live that concept, he needed the accoutrements. So jewelry was one of those accoutrements. I had a mother who loved jewelry, and I'm probably the only kid on my block or the only kid in my high school who grew up loving jewelry. I love jewelry. I love jewels. I loved my mother when she would get dressed up. And so he picked that up for me, and I had been fortunate enough to have some money and make some money. And so I had the wherewithal to purchase nice things. We had become friendly with some people in Beverly Hills. We'd go to eat at La Scala every day we were home in California. And La Scala is a very famous restaurant in Los Angeles, where all the stars and the big shots went. And they'd line up outside for hours every day to have lunch. And because of him and how he was, he had noticed that one of his students' husbands was such a big shot that he got his own place at La Scala. Nobody did. But by the time we left, we had not only our own place, it was right in the window in the front of La Scala. That's how he would maneuver. But one day we would go have lunch there at 1 o'clock. I'd pick him up, and then we'd walk down to Jerry's shop, this jewelry shop that I'm talking about, where we would sit there every day and watch the stars and the starlets, the wannabes and the bees come in. And we saw where he got all his material for teaching and how he got to learn and how he got to know that. And he'd have a seat right there, and Jerry, the owner of the shop, would have it, would be running around, and his mother would sit at a desk right behind there. And it was a family operation, and all these people would come in, and he and a couple of secretaries and I would spend a couple of hours there every afternoon. We'd get the jewels when they come in, we get the good deals, we get this, we get that, but that's another part of the story. But as we'd walk down every day, it was like he was the king of Beverly Hills. We'd walk down Brighton Way from La Scala, then make a left on Beverly Drive and walk past Dayton Drive and another block down to Canyon where Jerry's shop was. And as we'd walk down every day, there was 4 or 5 of us in the entourage. People would come out of their shop, all the shop owners, and Yogi, and they would wave at him, and he'd bow to him. It was a ritual that you had to see. He made a presence. But on this day, one day we were in his shop, and someone came in with a beautiful watch, and I had loved watches. My father had collected watches. It was one of the things of jewelry that a man could wear back in the day. Now I can wear anything. I wear necklaces, but back then a watch and a pinky ring or a ring was just about it. So my father loved watches and I loved watches, and I had a real propensity for them. And I guess he picked up on that because he learned to love watches. And I bought him a lot of watches. On this day, he was looking at another watch. It was a Vacheron, I think. And it was $10,000, and that's a lot of money for a watch. I'd spent more, but I spent a lot less, and usually they were less. And on this day, I don't know, I'd heard some bad news from my business, and I guess I was feeling insecure or whatever it is. And as he's looking over the watch and said to Jerry, we'll take it. As Jerry's packing it up, I leaned over to him. I still feel badly about it to this day. That's why I'm telling you this story. I'm not guilty, but I'm getting rid of my guilt if there's any there. I said to him, "Sir, you'll never push me beyond my capacity to match up, will you?" And rather than say, "Shut up, kid. I'm the teacher. You're the student. What the hell are you talking about? Keep your mouth shut and just follow over." And I'm big for loyalty and obedience, so don't get me down. That's why I'm here. And don't get me wrong. And rather than say those nasty words to me, he looked at me so compassionately and sweetly, and he said, "Son, I never would." And man, I was so happy to write that check, and I wrote him every check ever since then. And let me tell you that, you know how they say what you give, you get back tenfold? I got back a millionfold. I got back in my business. I got back in my life with cars and houses and jewelry. I got back in my consciousness with an elevated state of being. And I can't explain that to anybody because they won't understand. It's an experience. But I think the men here will tell you that I lived a royal life with him. Is that right, guys?
I'll tell you one thing. He was not going to tell you. I was on the East Coast and he came and talked about this guy who inherited millions of dollars. And he said, and I took him to Jerry's shop. And this is before I even knew what it was. I took him to Beverly Hills for 40 days and I spent his whole inheritance. You know, whether it's true or not, he's a great storyteller. I'm sure he spends a lot of money quickly when you have it. And
He
said,
did.
after 40 days, he said, he tells the story beautifully. After 40 days, he said, I spent it. And he said, and he drove over and picked me up every day or whatever it was. And on the 41st day, he was outside waiting for me anxiously in the car to go to Jerry's. And he said, I threw my arms up at that point and I said, I can't break this man. I'm paraphrasing it, but I said, nah, I want to be like this guy, you know.
You know, I think the three of us shared something very similar, is that we felt it was an honor to serve him and buy things for him. You know, we paid, I paid for all his meals and this and that, and I gave him money. You can tell him how you met me the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And we all shared that. It was an honor. We loved it. It was not a deficit. It wasn't something we had to endure. It was something we loved to do, serving the master. So we all shared that, and maybe that's why he had us in the positions he did.
I'm sure it is, and that story Dharma tells is the story I tell is the reason that he could tell Dharma that story, because that's how it ended. But it didn't end. Let me tell you, it never ended.
And then there was another 10, 15 years after that, and he was comfortable every day driving over. He had that one blip on the screen where he asked him if he was going to be all right, but he quickly got over it. And I never, one time, I'll tell you one story before I tell you one about Siri Mukta. I never told him no, and we spent a lot of money for 13 years. And one day I was down to just $1,000 left in my account, and I got 20,000 every Wednesday. But I had no money left, and I said, well, it's all right. I could have borrowed it from even him, but I just was nervous about it. And in the mail that day came a credit card for $1,000 that I just had to sign. And he sent me to Walmart with some Indian Sikhs. He said, buy them whatever they want. And they buy mascara and they buy all this stuff for their wives and their girlfriends back in India. And the bill was $997. So that was the only time I almost couldn't pay for him in 13 years. And I remember now Siri Mukta too, when I was in awe of Ari Jiwan and I was still living in Boston, I went to winter solstice and the Siri Singh comes out of the kitchen, a huge, and he's just holding court. And he goes, I need $500. And Siri Mukta was in the back and he raised his hand and just wrote a check for $500. I went, wow. I mean, what an honor. I said, I wish I could do that. And one day I got the opportunity, in spades.
And then we became friends after that, actually.
Yeah.
There's such a flow that moves through the City Sing stuff, such a flow of inspiration, matter, energy, life force, and you're just able to be a part of that flow, channeling green energy, right? Financial energy.
He never asked once how much money I had, how my business was doing, and he always spent a lot of money, including when my inheritance came. Never too much. Never too much.
Twice he said,
just under it. Go ahead.
Twice he said, give me 25,000. I needed for something in cash. Next day he had the money. that was our last bit of money that we had in the account, but we gave it to them. They did it again about a year or two later.
All the time.
So, it was constant being back and forth, but like you said it very well, Grufata, it was a constant flow of energy back and forth and up and down, in and out. And it was a precious experience. What can I tell you?
It was a protocol job, which was
Yet we were blessed to serve him financially and otherwise. Yet I don't know how many, every day, it's sometimes 2-3 times a day, there'd be somebody coming from the ashram here in Espanola or in LA. And we were more fortunate economically than most people to be able to accumulate some money. Most people lived hand to mouth, and that was understandable, but not desirable. And so he counseled all of these people. And I was lucky to be there when he counseled people. That was also another blessing of mine. So I saw how he did it and why he did it and what he did to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't count the thousands of times that at the end of the meeting, he would say, rather than, and they'd have to pay him like $108 or something like that. Most of them, some of them wouldn't, some of them would. But at the end of the meeting, he'd say to Soperk, give him a check for $1,008, or give him a check for $500, or give him a check for $108. And so he kept it flowing. He didn't keep it here. He kept it flowing. And that showed me that it trained me to understand that it was a flow. It wasn't, it didn't stop. Your money, Jerry used to say something interesting too as a businessman. He'd say anything that sits stinks. And that includes money. Mm-hmm. So he was always trading in jewelry or whatever. That's how he made all these deals. He was very fortunate for understanding that, because it made him a lot of money. Mm. And the Siri Singh Saab lived that concept. He didn't let anything sit, whether it was a part of your consciousness or a dollar bill he had to spend. It was flowing all the time.
He made $500,000 a year off of tantric, and he gave it all back. He gave it all to people. He just, like Jiwan said, it was a flow. He gave wherever. There's people he gave to that no one's ever going to know. People in India, orphanages. I mean, it was just a pipe flow of giving.
And he
taught us how to do it. We sat a front row seat, and it was a beautiful thing.
It was so beautiful watching him counsel people. Everybody was different. He'd treat everybody. He could read somebody like you couldn't believe. As soon as he saw you, or it was a done deal, he knew everything about you. Mm-hmm. And he would counsel you appropriately,
I did a meditation on aerodynamics a few days ago. And I was thinking about, as hippies, we had an expression, somebody's a drag, or it's a drag. So it's basically, in aerodynamics, there's that concept also.
Like a drag, like your plane drags, yeah.
Yeah.
Drag coefficient.
We can call it friction, or we can call it resistance. But that, in the spiritual realm, is where the sphere comes up, right? Now, universe means one flow. So on the spiritual level, on a human level, basically, drag is when you're resisting the flow of abundance that we've just been talking about. The Siri Singh was so immersed in. And then he would challenge you to see what your resistance was. What if you were being a drag, or if you were creating friction, because that's what you don't want.
That's a very good example.
When you're driving cars, drags is a good thing. You get right behind the first car and it drags you along. That's what I did with the Siri Singh Saab. So actually, drag in my case is a very good thing.
There was a good deal.
We try to be alongside him so the air would, in a car would keep you going.
So we've got a break.
One thing I want to say one thing about him. Somebody used to say, just very quickly, he was tireless in his work ethic. Morning, noon, night, just working, calling India, all from that little dome that he used to live in, this tiny little place. And he was just tireless in his work ethic. The only one who's even come close is his wife, actually.
Yeah.
And let me just say this about the movies that we went to. He went to the movies for many reasons. For instance, American English is 90% idiomatic, so you want to learn the idioms, so there's never been no better place than the movies. Otherwise, you don't understand English, American English. But one of the big reasons he went was that it was his habit to do that. Every afternoon, he'd go to work early in India and be finished. He'd be early. By early, I mean, he might be there at 6 o'clock. And by the early afternoon, he was done. And back when he was growing up, they didn't have air conditioning in India. So it was hot as can be in Delhi. The only place that had air conditioners were the movie theaters and the hotels. So he had the habit of, after work, he'd go to the movies every afternoon to cool off until the sun went down.
Wow.
He carried it over here. It's not a big secret. That's why.
Waheguru. Waheguru. Let's take a little break, about 5 minutes. We'll play our theme song here. And we'll meet again in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Coming off as all.
Jane is his word and fair brown form. The young ones today, the ones of the good, is that they play and we're all around the world. All around the world. The word of the word. All around brothers and sisters, all around the world, singing together, one voice to be heard, and our soul has awakened the darkness inside. We know each morning the good who brings stars all around the world. All around the world. Singing together, a voice to be heard. All around the world. Go temple.
I'm good XM4 at telling stories. I gotta make sure I finish one. Then just keep it going in order. You go first. I go second.
His word begins to be heard, singing all around the world. All around the world. Word of the begins to be heard. Brothers and sisters, all around the world, ship of the blue, the banners unfurled, and we're sailing together. The water's so blue, each
Well, I'm gonna say one.
Yeah, do you want to do that? Say, no, just say.
Say what? Say what?
Just say, both of us say, you want to contact us further.
Just
You're
have, let him
just
just
have to
contact
make a
me. It
thing
should
and
just,
hold
should be just one.
No, I
Hey,
don't
welcome
mind, so.
everybody.
You're not gonna say, but you just let go.
Tell me when.
We're back.
We're back
All right.
Okay.
in the Cadillac.
Somebody,
Mm.
a good friend of ours, he registered for all the sessions. He doesn't give up. Uh, I'm not going to mention him by name. He knows who he is. He has some very interesting questions. And,
Who does? Oh,
I can't hear you.
okay.
Who can't hear you?
Good, now, yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. So anyway, so these are leading questions, but I will address one of them. He's saying that in Amritsar, there's a gallery, I think it's a Sikh museum, where the Siri Singh Sab's picture has been, and he's saying, I don't know if it's true or not, that there's a plan to take that down. What do we think about that? It's a leading question, you know? But what my perspective is that the Siri Singh Sab, the gravity of his mission, his effect, won't be known for a couple of generations. So it's understandable. I mean, we're a bunch of punks. We haven't done very much. You know, if his picture goes down in Amritsar in 2020, it's perfectly understandable. But I think Siri Singh Sab was for the long term. We're for the long term, and the results won't be known for some time. It's very premature to judge his mission and his contributions. That's my humble response to that question.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, you judge him, you're judging yourself.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay, guys, did you want to talk about, Dharma Singh, you were the host of a very special guest who used to be the Secretary General. Anything you want to talk about?
I hosted Manjit Singh, there was the head of the,
No. From Secretary General of the Khalsa Council. Remember that lady?
Oh, I hosted her. She lived in my
You
house.
hosted her?
oh,
Oh,
he was ours. I took her out every day and she
Took
lived
her
here
out.
for a year,
a lot of her.
3
And
years.
I didn't even get into her book.
We were
But
dating.
I can't hear everything. What was the question?
Oh, you don't have to really get into it, but if you're interested, you want to say 2 words about that experience, go ahead.
Siri Singh Sab would often put people to live with us. Hari Jiwan had many people the early years. Nice people, not nice people. We just took them in. And he put Premk in with me when she lived. She came back, you know, I don't know the dates, in the 90s, to try to reconcile with him. And she spent about 3 years here, and for about a year she lived at my house. And I didn't have much to do with her. You know, I was polite to her. She was polite to me. You know, I don't want to slander her or say anything negative, but you know, there were a few inappropriate things she did, but I let it go. And but it was polite. She was very polite, you know, and we didn't talk about anything about allegations or any of that stuff. And my job was just to host her and be kind and compassionate as much as I could. And that was it, because he put her there. So I'm going to make sure that I take care of her.
You're right in a way. What happened with me was she worked with me at Ancient Healing Ways for a year. For the first 2 years, we went into Santa Fe for a year and a half, and we wined and dined her every night. And she was with this whole group of Wiccans, and they're women that this strange group.
What they call them?
The goddesses, they call
The goddesses, right?
And we took out 60 people a night to the El Dorado, 13 out of 14 nights. We'd drive her places. She'd almost admit this, that. And I thought, I can't say, but I was in meetings that almost stuff happened. But I'll say one thing. She was very graceful. she didn't, but it was like there was a plexiglass shield around the Dharma, and she was knocking on the window and she couldn't get in. And she wanted to get in, but she didn't want to do the discipline. And she didn't want to do the discipline. And she was so smart. She was 2 degrees off from understanding the guru perfectly, everything, but she had this agenda she couldn't beat that I'm not a psychologist, nor do I want to go into it. But she was actually very graceful, but she's sneaky a little bit in terms of she wanted her position back, it looked like, in the end, and she couldn't wait it out. And after 3 years, she said, my karma's to me, my karma's done, and I've worked it out with him, and boom, she was gone a day later. And Hari Jiwan came in. I was the head of Ancient Healing Ways, but he put him above me for about 3 or 4 months, so he can talk to about that and whatever else he wants to say about that experience.
My good.
No, I don't want to say anything about that experience,
Yeah.
but I'll answer your question for you. Your question was, how do I feel about the pictures coming down? I'm chief of protocol. So I view everything through that window. And that means that it's not how I feel about anything that matters. I have to take my feelings out of it entirely. I feel terribly about it, personally. But I judge everything on whether it's a protocol, a tradition, a ritual, or something else. And if it's a protocol, then there's no doubt it has to stay, because the protocol comes from the guru, and the guru is infinite. You don't mess with that. That was true, is true, and shall always be true. If you don't believe that, you better find a different discipline, because that's what we're about. So protocol doesn't change in my mind, and I'm struggling with some of the things now, like gay marriages, for instance. I'm not struggling. I'm just waiting to see what comes to me. I got a lot of things figured out. That one, I'm leaning one way, but I'm listening to everybody on that still. But the point is that I judge everything through that window. And his pictures are not protocol. His pictures are tradition. They're not structured by the guru that Yogi Bhajan's picture should be here, or that even the guru's picture should be here. None of that is part of our protocol. It's part of our tradition. So as much as I don't like it, I accept it, because it's not against the protocol, not against the rules. So it's a little different than most people. And if the Sangha decides they don't want a picture of Yogi Ji here or there, I may argue and fight against it, but until they decide they want it, they have the right to not want it, because it's a tradition. I hate it. I don't like it. I shouldn't use the word hate, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's how I deal with it.
Say one last thing about Premka that I think is important for the record. In those 3 years, we went out with her 13 out of 14 nights a week. So he put energy into her, all the energy he puts into you when you meet him. It happened again. It wasn't a happenstance, quick meeting. It was 3 years of intensive, Siri Singh spending a lot of the energy he had left on the planet interacting with her. And I got the experience of doing that too, being next to him the whole time. And he was beautiful. He really just showed his class.
Very good. Very good. So let's leave that subject. Let's talk about, I'm looking for stories, because, I'm still thinking of doing another edition of the biography that he set me up to do. So there's already one edition, like it's a second edition now, but I'm gathering more stories for the next edition. Anybody got some jewels? I'm sure you do. Who wants to go first?
Let's see. I'll tell you a story. If I get emotional, I apologize beforehand. A few years before he died, I used to complain to him about the people who ran the businesses and his staff. I used to always complain to him. He used to yell at me. So I did it again a couple of years before he died. I couldn't hold myself in. They were sabotaging him. One of the heads of the businesses did give him the right information, purposely hid it from him. I was pissed off. So I came to him expecting he's going to yell at me again. And I started crying in front of him. I said, they're gonna, give me a second. They're going to destroy everything, I said. After you die, they're going to destroy it. And he started crying. And he said to me, son, we have to do what we have to do and let God do what he has to do. That's the story. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you got me tearing up.
One time when he was very sick, a few years before he passed, I walked over to the dome a little early, and nobody was in his room, and he was sitting on the edge of his bed, kind of rocking in pain. And I felt so badly for him. I climbed on the bed and went over to him and started massaging his shoulders. And that wasn't my job. I didn't massage his feet or his shoulders or do that kind of personal work for him. He had plenty of people that did that. They loved to do it. And that wasn't my position. But I just wanted to do whatever I could to make him feel better. So I started massaging his shoulders, and thinking I'd make him feel better, I said something like, you know, sir, you don't have to keep hanging around this planet. We're set. We'll take care of everything. Little did I know what a fool I was. You don't have to go through this pain. He said, shut up. You know how you do that? Shut up. And I said, what? I could be wrong again? What? Well, like I'm going to hear it again. He said, that's not why I'm going through this. And I said, why are you going through this, sir? He said, son, I've taught so much in my life, and I've hoped and prayed and cajoled and kicked people to do what they couldn't. And sometimes I did it when I shouldn't have, because it's not the job of a teacher to push a student beyond his capacity. And I'm paying that karma off for this now. It was out of my compassion I did it, he said, but still I have to pay it off. And I thought to myself right then that, and I still think to this day, that anybody who wants to doubt him, if they could just see, and this is just one conversation, one day in thousands of days, tens of thousands. And this is, if they could just see his sensitivity in not only understanding his position, but understanding why his position is what it is, you can understand that he was not your ordinary Joe. Not at all.
You should have seen how he suffered those last 2 years. And he said sort of the same thing to me. And I'll tell you about him crying with Premka. It's interesting. I forgot about this. One time he walked out of his house and he started crying. He said to me, I put everything into Premka. did everything for her. She became everything. She was a princess. I don't remember the words. These aren't the exact words, but he kept saying and crying and crying and crying. I did everything and just ba, ba, ba. And then another time I went out to him, one of the last trip he took to LA. And he called me over at 9 in the morning. And he comes out and he says, I want to take a walk with you, Dharma. It was one of the last walks he took. He walked around the block. And first he started crying. He goes, Dharma, I couldn't sleep last night. I realized I could make an ant into a teacher. I could make an ant into a teacher. And he kept repeating it. And tears were streaming down his eyes. And I don't exactly understand what it meant. I mean, the guru, it talks about an ant to a teacher. I'm trying to put it together. But he actually was up all night. That's who we were dealing with, who people are denigrating right now. And I go with what he was saying was true, that was his experience. And a number of other times I saw him cry. With Premka, he cried because he loved her. All that happened to him. He didn't care. He was who he was. He wanted her to be okay. He said, I will be under every stone in the universe that you turn up. My face will be there to her. And she had to deal with that for 3 years, him saying all those things. And she was smart as a whip and she heard all of it. But here she is right now, back again in whatever mode, doesn't matter. But boy, she was something. She was something, and he put a lot into her. And all the people like Charan Singh, he cried. I put all my energy into these Mukta Singh Sabs, and they all let me down. And he kept going though. Kept going to class and teaching because that's who he was. That's his history. That's his legacy. And we got to see the sideshow, which is helping thousands and thousands of people and living and getting to and from class. That was my job. Getting him to go out at night and we went to so many political events, you can't believe it. We met presidents when they got off the plane every president we met since Bush. And they talked to us, they loved us because we weren't asking for anything. I remember George Bush Jr. We went and we're Democrats, right? We were all Republicans there. And he finishes speaking. They say, he will sign no autographs. He will talk to nobody. He's getting on the plane and going out to the next place. And I was up in the front. So as he walked by, I said, I really like your faith-based organization thing. I didn't even know what it was. And he pushed them aside and started talking to me. And he ended up talking for 20 minutes. And Domenici and all the senators were saying, he's got to go. And we ended up giving him gifts. And he pushed them all. He just wanted to talk to us. He just wanted somebody real. And it was all because, and none of the Republicans could talk to him. He didn't want anything to do with him. He wanted it to do. And then finally, Yogi Ji comes up in his wheelchair. He has 1.5 years to live. And Siri Mukta was there with it. And he acknowledged the Siri Singh Sahib completely. I wonder if he ever saw him in an ashram at some point in his drinking days down in Houston. But that's a sideshow. Go ahead.
One time I was, now this story is old hat now because we know so much, but you have to remember this was the early 80s and we didn't know so much. This was in the days where I would pick him up and there wouldn't be any secretary or any security. Just he and I would go wherever we wanted. We'd go to this, we'd go to this meeting, we'd go to that place, we'd go to the World Affairs. One day we went to had a meeting at the World Affairs Council with Archbishop Runzi of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we were downtown afterwards, after lunch, and then we went to see another jeweler that we know down there that we became very friendly with. And By the time we were done buying and kibitzing, it was 5:30 or so. So we got the car, I got the car, we drove back, we're going back home. And he said, "Are you hungry, son?" I said, "I'm famished." So he said, "Why don't we get something to eat? Where should we go?" And I said, "Wherever you'd like to go." And then I realized that's not the way he was. When he asked you where you want to go, he wanted your suggestion. He didn't need your permission to have to have him. So he wanted your advice. So I said, "Well, I know this place. Let's go there." He said, "Fine, let's go." So downtown, and then there's Hollywood, and there's Beverly Hills, and so on the way home, there's Hollywood Hills, and up in the hills there's this place that I'd been to with my parents 20 years before that they had taken me to. It was a Chinese restaurant up in the hills, beautifully done, manicured perfectly. That old style that was just elegant. So I hadn't been there since I'd been in California. I hadn't been back. I thought to myself, well, I'll take him up there because it was a special place. So we did. We drive through the hills, and I'm just praying that I can remember how to get there, because when you get up in the Hollywood Hills, it's not like the streets go straight. There's a bunch of different ways to go to every place. But through Guru's grace, I made it. And we parked the car. I dropped him off, parked the car, I met him in, and it's kind of a beautiful pagoda type of a restaurant where it's open on the front, on the side of a mountain overlooking the whole LA basin, with an indoor restaurant there and an outdoor restaurant. It's just really fun.
My stuff up to it.
No, I'll give you everything.
I don't care. I want to put mine up to
You
you.
lose it.
And we went to our table and we got some drinks, I got the pineapple pina colada and he got Mai Tai virgin or whatever it was, they're sweet kind of oriental drinks that are nice. And as we got him, he said, "Come on, let's take a walk out here." So we got up from the table while our meal was still coming, and we walked out to the balcony where there's a big balcony, and it overlooks, you're hanging over the mountain, and it overlooks the whole LA basin. And we're standing there looking it's just at the twilight time when the night is becoming day and the lights are out, but it's still light out and the sun is there. It was just one of those, and the sunset, it was just one of those mystical days. And he looks at me and he says, you see that over there, son? And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's Beverly Hills, some of the richest people in the world." Bel Air, actually, I think he said. "Some of the richest people in the whole world live there." I said, "Yeah, sir." He said, "You see down there?" And he showed me Chavez Ravine, where the Dodger Stadium is. It's highly immigrant Hispanics that live there. He said, "You see that area down there?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Some of the poorest people in the world live there." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You see that area over there?" And he pointed to what we could barely see was that Greek Orthodox church, which has a big dome on it, which is right next to ours down on Prus. And he said, "You see that?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's halfway between those rich people in Bel Air and those really poor people in Chavez Ravine. That's where we live." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "It doesn't matter whether you come from this area, or this area. They're all in pain." And that, for the first time, I recognized that it wasn't money that made me happy or yoga that made me happy. It was me that made me happy. And that was true for everybody in the world. Didn't matter how much money they had or how much prestige or status they had. They didn't have what I had. I had hope. I had hope at that time. Didn't have a consciousness, but I had hope. And that experience taught me that he knew some stuff. And then I got into reading the Guru, of course, as I was studying that. And that's exactly what the Guru said.
Mm.
Exactly what the Guru said. There you go. I felt very good about that. I still do, about many of the things he said, because you can go to the Guru and read about it.
Hmm. He spoke in American English, which he learned from the movies. But basically, he's a conduit for what the Guru said.
Yeah, that's right.
A very good conduit.
That's right.
Yeah, you can take a lot of his sayings, like the famous one, you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. You can find that in a lot of places the Guru said just exactly that. In Gurmukhi.
I'll tell a little story, shouldn't take too long. About 7, 8 years of driving him, one day in the Dome, he said to me, "You've served me perfectly for 7 years without flaw." And in my mind, I go, "Yeah, sure, you're buttering me up." And he says, "But you've never asked me a question." And I thought about it, and I didn't ask another question. And 4 years later, I was alone with him in the Dome in tremendous pain, but not at all. I was still in the bliss. The worst things happened to me. It was just another day with him. I mean, the stuff that happened to him, it was tragedy for breakfast, treachery for lunch, corruption for tea, and betrayal for dinner. But it was a heavy thing. And I was alone with him, and I told him, and I decided to ask him a question. But I was flummoxed when I asked him, and I said, "Sir, if you were in my position in this situation, what would you do?" And I blinked my eyes. He looked like he was like, he said, "I think second about my whole life, let's say. I'd really analyze everything. It'd be messed up." And, all of a sudden, I looked at him, and he looked scared, like, did I hurt my son? And I blinked my eyes, like, him scared? And I blinked my eyes, and it's all, hundredth of a millionth of a second. And it was the stern Yogi Bhajan, Siri Singh Sahib, we all know, "I don't give a damn what you think." And so what was the lesson in it? Asked me a question. So 4 years later, I asked a question, and he had it saved up in the back of his mind. When I asked the question, he said, "Screw you. There's no question. You don't have any question to ask me." And the question was goofy. It was, I was in pain. And I said, "What would you do?" And instead of saying, "What should I do?" And it was a difficult response.
And for me, it was the opposite. He allowed me to ask him any question I wanted.
Exactly. It was
Just, I used to infuriate the staff because they wanted their attention or whatever. And so I'd ask him anything, whatever I felt like asking him. I didn't want to abuse the privilege, but if I had something I wanted to know, and
he would always answer it.
he'd always answer me.
To the consternation of everybody else, he would always answer it and keep going.
So talking about the afterlife, and I asked him, "Oh, where's Hitler's soul?" I said, "Where is this?" I started asking him questions, and he was happy to talk about it. On that particular point, he just looked in the air and didn't answer me. And I finally said, "What's going to happen to me after you die?" He said, "I'll be waiting for you." And I think he's going to be waiting for all of us.
Right.
So we better be able to look at him in the face without our ego, without our body, soul to soul, and tell him we did the right thing.
Hmm.
Because we're all going to meet him on the other end.
Swear ya, 125% better than our best.
And I very rarely asked him questions, but when I did, I would couch it differently. Normally questions I'd ask him is about dealing with people. How do I deal with this guy? He's not performing well. I don't want to fire him. What should we do? Where should we move him? Things like that. And, I didn't ask him questions about spirituality so much, mostly about everyday functions, business-wise, living-wise. And I'd always say to him, "What does your intuition tell you about this, sir?" And that always got him to a place where he would answer the question differently. And that worked for me. He would always answer the question after reflecting on it for a minute. Like when he used his intuition, it would either come to him as he was talking, or sometimes he would hesitate for just a short term, and he didn't hesitate much at all. So when he did, I knew what was happening. And that's what happened at those times. I appreciated those times the most.
Like
He said-
you
you
anonymize,
Pardon?
anonymize one of those personal or business situations and then give us his advice?
He would say, let's talk about the example I gave you, where somebody who's working for me is not performing, but we don't like to just fire people because that's not our policy. He said to me, well, you have a sales room there too, don't you? I said, yeah. He said, move him over there. It's on commission. He'll perform. And he did, by the way.
My goodness. My goodness. Thank you.
You have a lot more questions, or we can keep telling stories, whatever you prefer.
Telling stories. I'll prod you if I have to. Although
Well-
Dharma Singh, I was gonna approach you afterwards, but I didn't get that exactly. When you were going for the Siri Singh Sab's last walk in Los Angeles, I didn't understand, partly it's because you're distant from the mic, I think. You were saying that he said something about an anthem or an ant or something? What was that he said?
Oh,
Yeah.
ants. He said, I can make an ant into a teacher.
Oh,
He was crying, bawling. And he says, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I can make an ant into a teacher. I can make an ant into a teacher. And he said it for like 2 minutes, which wasn't his style.
my goodness. So what did you get out of that? It's true, he could make an ant into a teacher. But why was
What
he
I got
sacrificed?
out of it, what I got out of it was what I got every day out of him. How extraordinarily, unbelievably all-knowing he was. I would be with him and I'd realize he knew everything. And after about 2 months, I'd go listen and I'd say, well, he doesn't know where Elm Street is. He doesn't know this or that. And then I'd go to class and I'd say, he knows everything again. It was a constant circle of realizing. And so when he said, I can make an ant into a teacher, it meant there's nothing he couldn't do.
Once we were walking from where he lived to Bhajan Singh had a house. We used to walk down the road there, Proust Road, not Proust Road, where I lived. And I started in my mind, like questioning him in a certain way. I said, I wonder if he knows everything about me, like my history or any of that. And I'm helping him walk down the road. I didn't say a word about it to him, of course. And he looks at me and he says, Sir, son, I've known you. And he tells me the precise amount of years and months that he knew me, just by, I guess, reading my mind or whatever. But he answered me, he knew everything about what I was through. I used to start to talk to him about my life in different ashrams. Then he would finish the sentences. He knew all those things. It just flowed out of him. He said, he once said at Gurdwara, he said, and he never demonstrated them because he tried it early on. He showed somebody how to levitate somebody and they messed up at the YMCA. And he never taught those kind of things, but he said he knew all the power, he had all the powers, he said, that you read about and powers you didn't read about in the books. But he never flaunted it or never even demonstrated it, or just because he was human. He was into being kind, compassionate. Guru Ramdas was his teacher.
I remember
One time we were walking in Beverly Hills and we stopped at this shop. It was a men's shop. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't matter. We stopped in a lot of places, and we're looking at some overcoats or something. And this well-dressed black gentleman comes up to us, and Siri Singh Saab looks at him and said, "Oh my God, Wayne, how are you?" And it was that man you were talking about that he taught to levitate. And Wayne.
Yeah,
And he was very, very respectful to that gentleman and treated him not like, I always knew when he met old students, because it would be, oh, look who it is, or oh, how are you, or oh, how's it going? It was always I knew what was coming when I heard him go, oh, yeah, I knew it was coming. And but he didn't do that with this gentleman. He was very respectful and courteous, and so was this man. And we spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes spent right, just the three of us. I didn't say anything for it. And it was a very nice conversation. And then we left, and I asked him who it was, and then he told me who it was. But that relationship that he had with that man endured because of what he had given him in that kind of relationship, beyond what a student and teacher would be. When you leave your teacher, he's always respectful and absolutely mannerful, and will help you if you ask him, but he will not go out of his way to help you at all. And he went out of his way to help this Wayne. It was interesting.
That was Premka's frustration. He was your energy, everything. But like he said, that's 3 short stories. One quickly, in New York City, he was walking with an entourage. I wasn't there. And he said, "Let's go in this door." He went into a skyscraper up 6 floors and walked in an office and said, "You're my student for many lifetimes." It was Narayan Singh, that face reader, incredibly interesting.
The guy from Oregon.
Oregon, yeah. And it all happened that way. So that's enough on that one. Second, I went to New York with Richard Green. We traveled to Phoenix. It was the last trips of travel. And we went to New York, and we weren't sleeping for night after night after night. And it was about 3, 4 in the morning. And he had an astrologer over, and he was so tired and hadn't slept for so long that while he was having him interpret the stars first, and then he would say whatever he said, he started saying where the stars were, where everything was having, without any books, any astrology, because he let it slip. He said, "My best thing is faking that I know something when I know nothing." And it was just amazing. I saw him slip sometimes. The one thing he tried to do was act professional all the time, slip where he showed he knew everything. And there was another one that
let me say one, then you can come back to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Siri. Look, this is the last one.
I remember sometimes, it didn't happen often, maybe 2, 3 times. And to this day, I don't really understand it, but we'd be sitting there, 15, 20 people in the room. And I had some very personal questions to ask him. I was not going to ask him in front of everybody. If I wanted to, I could go through the rigmarole of trying to get a private audience with him and this and that, and that happened at different times, but he just tuned into me, and we started communicating back and forth mentally. I'd ask a question, very personal, intimate stuff that I wouldn't share with anyone except him. And he'd give me the answer, and we'd start a dialogue. And I thought he was like talking out loud. I mean, it was just like a regular dialogue or something. I don't understand it to this day. So after 5, 10 minutes, it ended. And I asked the person next to me, "Did you hear all that?" And they said, "No, what?" "No, I didn't hear anything." So those are the kind of things he did. Not to demonstrate anything to show off, certainly not that, but to give me a teaching or whatever. And so I just thought I'd mention that. I mean, so many stories. I mean, we had a celebration in an adjoining city. With a bunch of Indian Sikhs were there, thousands of them. He wanted us to participate. And my ego was such, I said, oh, there was a big banner. Oh,
The
uh-oh.
transmission it just went kind of warpy. Can you
Okay,
say
I
that
hope
again?
it maintains.
How far back was it? How far back?
There was a gathering, something.
Yeah, and a bunch, thousands of Indian Sikhs were there.
In India? Where?
No, an adjoining city in California. I was living in LA. This is early 80s probably.
Thank you.
And we got to the celebration and there was this huge banner, like 10 feet across, on a wooden thing. And my ego was such, I said, hey, I want to carry that. I felt pretty strong, fit. So I said, I want to carry that. So they gave me a harness. I put the thing in and I couldn't see Siri Singh Sahib. I didn't know where he was. There's thousands of Sikhs all over the place. And I'm in the head of this procession. I'm carrying this huge thing. I don't even know what it said. It was, I think, in Punjabi. And every half hour they come to me. They said, "Do you want to get relieved? You know, we have somebody else." I said, "No, I'm going to do it." This goes on hour after hour. Finally, we finished the whole thing about 5 hours later. I undo it, and then the pain starts setting in from carrying this thing. And it got worse the next day. And then on Tuesday, which the day he taught in LA, I could just hobbling around. I couldn't even move. I was just a wreck physically. And he starts lecturing me. I couldn't understand what he was saying. I was in pain. And I didn't get anything. I mean, I didn't understand what he was talking about. My pain was so much I couldn't do it. I could barely move. 20 years later, I walk into Guru Ram Das ashram. He died. And I start crying because give me a second. Okay, I start crying because there's nobody doing the foot washing at Guru Ram Das ashram. I was the person who always did it. But when I was with him, I'd be in the dome with him while he gave his lecture on Sundays, so I didn't do the foot washing. I was with him. And then if he came, I accompanied him onto the stage and I sat next to him when he did come. But the last, I don't know how long, year or two, he didn't go to Gurdwara physically. So I start crying because nobody's doing the foot washing. And so so it came to me what he said to me 20 years before. He said, "Son, always carry the banner." And I started doing foot washing again every week. So I just thought I'd share that with you because somehow it came to me 20 years later. I didn't hear what he said when he told it to me 20 years previous to that, but it all came to me at that moment. So that's what we all have to do is carry the banner.
I can tell a story. I can tell a story quickly about he could always talk. 30 people could be in the room, and he could talk to one person and tune the other 29 out so that they didn't hear what he said. And Hari Jiwan may remember this. He's the only one who heard it. He may not even remember it now, but he was in a coma in and out for the last 4 days of his life. And he spoke 23 words in 17 minutes on Sunday Gurdwara. And it was a lot longer than that. It was just, but the words are translated, they're beautiful. And there's 30 people in the room. And it was, painful, but just, we had been through it every day. So it was our job to be with them every day to cheer them up for the last 2 years. And after he does a lecture, he sits up like it was 20 years ago. And he starts talking to me. He starts saying, "Nobody knows who you are. No one will ever know who you are." Blah, blah, blah. I said, sir. And he kept going on. And it went on for 5 minutes. And finally, I just was like, no. And then he threw everybody out. And Hari Jiwan said this in Iranian, somebody, "Did you hear what he said?" I said, "What?" "Well, I don't know." And I asked 3 other people, no one heard it. And what it was all these people that I talked to got a last teaching from him. You know, whether it was a year before, 10 years before, there was a last thing he said to them. I finally realized that what it was not to get caught up in other people's opinion of you. Be who you're supposed to be. But I mean, what a beautiful thing. He sat up and put that energy out for me. It was, you know. And then
are we ready
he
to,
died a couple days later.
are we ready to? Are you done?
I am done.
I want to say, unless you're going to bring it up before we leave about the allegations, or is that a separate topic? Or
I thought we finished with the allegations, but if you want to get back into it, go ahead. Hari Jiwan doesn't touch them, and that's maybe just a good thing to do. Go ahead.
look, in duality, you'll never achieve divinity. Doubt is another word for duality. When you doubt something, you'll never get to your core self, who you are. I was trained never to doubt him. I'm not going to get into whether they're true or they're not true. It's a ridiculous to me conversation. He's not here to defend himself, nor should he ever have to defend himself. It's up to us to do it. And I just have trained not to judge him. I'm going towards the light. I'm not going towards doubt and duality. As I said, in duality, you'll never achieve divinity. And that's how I feel about this whole thing. You know, I think it was mismanaged by us as a and you know, spiritual body, or whatever we call ourselves, organization. And I'm not going to entertain it, because I'm not going to judge him. You know, there's individual truth, circumstantial truth, and universal truth. Most people come from individual truth. If I had to guess, I'd say 98% of people probably. And he was on such another plane of why he did things, how he did things. All I can tell you is he served everyone, even his enemies. And that's all I really need to say. So I'm not getting into the pros and cons, who's right, who's wrong, all that stuff. It's a ridiculous conversation. Whether he did things or he didn't do things, I never saw anything. And I'd be there at all hours too at the time. I never saw a thing, but I don't even want to get into it. I'm just saying, you judge him, you're judging yourself. That's how I look at it. So somebody else can talk.
I have nothing to say, but I agree with him. Just take this snippet that we've had today and juxtapose that against these allegations of 7, 8 people who are all proven mentally imbalanced. And I didn't want to get into it. It's just take them, you know, however you take them is what you get.
Let me say this about the allegations. First of all, if it matters whether he did or he didn't, you haven't reconciled it. You haven't figured it out. That comes with the turf. That I understand. But whether the allegations are true or not begs the issue. This earth will have its piece of flesh. This earth that plays by rules that we must follow, and we follow, and we have to. The heavens play by a different set of rules. And those rules we have to follow as well. But those rules have to be reconciled with the earth rules, because the earth rules have to be followed as well. So how do you do that becomes the question of the of infinity, because it's the law of polarity that you solve when you understand that. But all of that I just use for a frame of reference has to be put aside, because the rule of the ether, the rule of the heavens, the rule of the guru is forgiveness. And That's not the rule of the earth, although it can be. But that rule of forgiveness, whether it's right or wrong, or it's true or not, and not if he did the allegations, you have to have the capacity to forgive, and if he didn't do the you have to have the capacity to forgive, and if he didn't do the allegations, you have to have the willingness to forgive. And if you don't understand that the reconciliation comes first through understanding, second through tolerance, first through tolerance, second through patience, third through understanding, fourth through compassion, and fifth through forgiveness. If you just skip all of that and go to forgiveness, you don't need the progression because you're already there. You're following the guru. That's what the guru says. That's not what the law says here in the world. But the guru says time and time again, I am forgiveness. And if you want to understand the reconciliation between the heavens and the earth, you must be willing to forgive. That's all I want to say. Rightfully or wrongfully, you must have forgiveness in you. Forgiveness doesn't judge whether the issue is right or wrong, or 50% or 20%. Forgiveness is 100% forgiveness, period. That's forgiveness. All the rest is bullshit. So unless you have the capacity to forgive, you'll never reconcile this conundrum.
God will sort it out. We just have to forgive.
It starts with forgiving yourself.
That's part of it, Siri Mukta. You can't forgive others unless you forgive yourself first. That's right.
Don't dump it on someone else. Like
Forgiveness belongs and begins at home. That's correct.
Right.
And
So
if you
all
have
the
a guru, you understand there's nothing to forgive. You know, he forgives everything. So what do you have to forgive about yourself? That's why people get mad at me all the time when they say, well, don't you feel badly about this? I don't know. Oh, that's so dispassionate. That's so unforgiving. I said, no, it's not. You'll get it someday.
there's only one sin in Sikh Dharma. That's recognizing that God doesn't exist within you.
God doesn't
God
exist.
such, you God such, Hebi such, Nanak Hosi be such.
Wow.
You know,
Say that
God
again.
exists. God existed forever, through all times, now and forever. That's the only sin in Sikh Dharma.
Very good. We don't have to continue, you know, we've got our musicians here. If we're finished, we're finished.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to say one thing. Call it a political statement, call it however you want. But we have an organization that's run a certain way. And I want to protect his legacy. The only effective way to do that is to change the nature of who the people are who are running this whole thing, which is called the Siri Singh Saab Corporation. We have an election in 2 years. We're having one in the next few weeks, an interim election, because people quit or they didn't want to serve, this and that. So please write to me, Gurfata, if you can give him my email address and give him Dharma's also. I want to start forming a database of people who are in support of the Siri Singh Saab, and I want to get voters to vote in 2 years prior to that, you know, qualify to vote, get people to run for the Siri Singh Saab Corporation who believe in him and his legacy, want to preserve it. So if you don't mind giving it to everybody, sharing my email and Dharma's also, we'd like to start that up, and everybody feel free to communicate with me. I'd be happy to talk to everyone. And that's all I really have to say.
You can put up my email and my phone number. Anybody that has any questions or wants any help or anything,
Yeah,
you know, call me, write to me. I'll do my best.
and same for me. You can give them my phone number. I have nothing to hide.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Any other comments?
Do you know how many people are participating in this call?
Right now, there's 25.
Okay,
What I'd say is we can have specific ones in the future, every month, whatever, every 3 months, every month, where people can ask questions. I'd love those 25 people to hear what they want to know. today we've started everything. And I hope they got a taste of who and what we are and what the Dharma is. But we could start getting more specific in terms of letting people ask questions and have them interact and hopefully get some depth of understanding of what they've run up against here, the Dharma.
Very good.
I just say, don't lose faith, everyone. Just keep it up. Accept everything that comes to you. Katia Dupuk Sanma Ebi Datari Data.
Yeah, we know
There's a
that.
tombstone of that saying in near the dome where he was living. And it's from Japji Sahib. And it's like, God, give me 1,000s of misfortunes, it's all thy will and thy grace. That's what he lived by. And that's what we're all trying to live by.
Why good? Okay, I'm gonna put Simrat Kaur on. She's all the way over in Ireland. And I think her mic is on now. Simrat Kaur?
Pretty picture.
A little early. She wasn't expecting to go on for a few minutes. I think her mic is on. Maybe she's getting her guitar.
Oh, nice.
What's that?
Getting her guitar.
I was going to play
And
it.
I want to thank Satpal Kaur.
Huh?
I want to thank Satpal Kaur. She's done a marvelous job, and now she doesn't ever ask me to slow down anymore. She's got it all at once. She's got an ear and a mouth at the same time. Very
Yes,
good.
Lift our car. Lift our car.
Lift our car.
Lift our car.
She's
Lift
got
our
an
car.
ear
Thank
and a
you.
mouth
Thank
that are simultaneously.
She's
Thank
excellent.
you very much.
Thank you, Lift Our Car. You're great. By God's grace.
Simrat Kaur, are you there? If we can't reach her, we'll just sing Long Time Sun.
All right, Jimmy, you got your guitar in the area?
No, I'm too old for that.
Okay.
Harry Joe's become an observer.
Ah,
I'm watching to see who pulls this together. Past my time. Let's see whose time it is. Sorry, I knew your name. I don't know why I said Satpal Kaur. I know you're Livtar Kaur. Please forgive me.
We can't hear you, Liftar.
She's talking.
no, that's cool. That's the way the system is set up.
She's talking to the Spanish.
Oh,
Okay, let's just sing Long Time Sun. Okay, let's put our hands together. We'll wrap it up. May the long time sun shine
On you, all love
around
around you,
and
and your light within you.
God,
Guide your way on.
may the long
Sun
all love surround you, and the pure light within you. Guide
guide your way on.
God,
Guide your way on.
guide
your
your
way
way on. Formless in every form, divine in every creation. We thank you for bringing us together. We thank you for allowing the technology to work. We thank you for our selfless interpreter. Let us take these stories and keep them alive. Let us pass them on and pass them on. Let's live in the grace of the example of the city Singh Sahib. May we be healthy, happy, and holy. May we live as lighthouses by your grace. Satnam.
So, thank you,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you so very much. This is being recorded. It'll be available online very shortly. Thank you again. We're going next week to Los Angeles with Tezcor and to Peru with Baltezcor, Ecuador with Dharma Singh. We're going to have more fun next week. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Tired.